Hello and welcome to the Binge Thinker episode 61. My name is Jamil Raymond. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here as always. On this week's episode, we continue my $30 million tech sales course for absolutely zilch. What fantastic value for you, dear listener. Amazing stuff. This week, we're talking about communication. We're talking about the essential communication and presentation skills you need to be an effective salesperson, because that is essentially the core of your job. Previously, on last week's episode, we talked about the difference between B2C sales and B2B sales, and gave you a general understanding of what sales is like and what marketing is like to a degree as well. So going from the macro of what the ecosystem looks like into more of the practicalities of what you should be doing and what skills you need to hone to be a fantastic people person inside tech. And that's what's going to make you effective. That's going to make you a great communicator. That's going to give you great leverage. It's going to give you skills that you can compound and use for life. This is what I'm trying to teach in this course. I'm trying to give you skills that are going to benefit you anywhere and everywhere in your career, right? Giving you the essential tool belt for what is practical and useful in life, not just in the sales game. So, without further ado, I've pretty much given you a good sell on what that is. Let's get started. So, communication, one of the most practical skills you need to understand, one of the most practical skills that will follow you anywhere in life. The more effective a communicator you are, the more powerful your words become, the more efficient that you can get information across in this information age and are able to contextualize it in different formats, rinse and repeat this wisdom, your insight, your knowledge over and over again. This is one of your core tools, not just as a salesperson, but a business person, as a better anything, right? Any relationship that you engage in life and its quality is going to be highly determined by the quality of your communication skills. So how do we contextualize that into the world of tech sales, which is what we're dealing with day to day? In the sales game, your job really as a salesperson is to be an effective communicator of value. What does your brand, what does your organization, what is your solution, what are your products, what makes them different, what makes them useful to the customer in question, and how good are you articulating it into a format that they understand that aligns best with their needs, their requirements, their values to leverage your position in getting a sale, right? That's why communication, written, verbal, is extremely important. And the best salespeople, the best leaders, the best people persons are fantastic with language. We love language. We love the art of communication. And it's not about just words. It's about tone. It's about body language. It's about how you present yourself holistically as an individual, right? Because, again, in the tech game, we are in the information age. So the quality of the information that you put out there is pretty much a key indicator of how successful you're going to be in your role or in any roles, because that's what we're just all exchanging. One of the great flows in the ecosystem of tech sales, besides product, is information, is knowledge, right? We are in the information technology sector. So therefore, how you effectively communicate information and put that to other will determine your success as a salesperson, okay? So how do you achieve being a good communicator in tech sales? It doesn't differ from being a good communicator or largely even being a good person in general. Communication is a sub-skill in the toolkit of you being a fantastic person to deal with in your little area, right? If you're a salesperson, you're an account manager, you effectively have to own your piece of the customer's perspective world, right? If, for example, when I worked at Telstra and I was the account manager, it was my responsibility as the front line to manage the mess that was behind me of the complexity of process and legacy systems and bullshit that gets in the way of creating a great, simplified experience for the customer, and being able to articulate all of the jargon and all of the complexity into simple contextual outcomes and languages that the customer understood, again, to communicate value, to build a relationship, to build value in the relationship, and eventually convert that into a sale, right? So when I talk about being a good people person in tech, you can get rid of the in tech part. All you need to be is a good person, and you will do well in any sales or people focused role, because again, that's what we're dealing with here. It is just the ecosystem of people playing with these different ideas of what business should be and what a solution should look like, right? One of the key things that we always say, particularly in being the people side of tech, is people buy from people, okay? So it doesn't matter necessarily how good your tech is if you are not in the trusted network because you haven't proven yourself to be trustworthy to the person that's buying, or you don't speak their language effectively, or you don't communicate how this could be better for a customer, better than your competitors. It doesn't matter how good your fucking product is. It's gonna fall to shit because you are not good at communicating that value, and you are not someone that people want to deal with. And that's a big problem when you are in relationship sales and portfolio management, which is a key part of being an account manager, being a BDM, or being in sales, particularly in vendor land, where you're managing a portfolio. You'll usually manage a portfolio whether you're working in a partner organization or a service integrator. If you're working internally for a vendor, wherever it is, regardless, most likely you'll have a group of people that you need to nurture the relationships through, strategic conversations, additional value. But first and foremost, do these people want to deal with you, and are you good at speaking their language and solving their problems? Because if you can do that, be a good person, you can figure out the rest, because there are plenty of other people that are less capable and less functional within the tech sales ecosystem, like people who are happy to be engineers and architects and people that don't necessarily want to be customer facing, that can figure out the logistics and the detail behind your grand vision, your solution, etc. Right? So you, particularly as an account manager, a relationship manager of any sort, have to develop fantastic people skills, and very at the core is communication skills. Okay? So ideally, hopefully, I shouldn't have to tell you how to be a good person. Okay? Be honest, be personable, don't bullshit people. Right? Number one rule, I think this is from Napoleon Hill, secrets to think, I think it's think and Grow Rich, but the golden rule in business, when you say people buy from people, is to treat others the way that you would like to be treated. That's really simple karmic shit. And you know the difference of when you are acting in your integrity and acting with honesty with people. It doesn't mean that you have all the answers all the time. But if you commit to being honest and straightforward and committing to what you can deliver, right? Never commit to what you can't deliver. That is a key part of your integrity as a salesperson, right? Because people expect you to talk shit to get a sale. But if you can actually back up what you're saying by having the integrity to back up your claims, see things to fruition, right? You are selling twice when you're a salesperson. You're selling once when you sell them the solution, and once again when you deliver on that promise. Let's take a sip there. Now, sales is a contact sport. Okay, great line that I picked up from one of my managers recently, which is very, very true. Sales is a contact sport. Okay, and what does that mean? That means you need to be in front of your customer as often as you can, building trust. Right? One of the key things we'll learn in the next episode or two, where I'll give you a sneak peek now, is the trust formula. Okay, the trust formula is something that I took from Seth Godin, legendary marketer, published a lot of fantastic books, including This Is Marketing. And he gave this to me, well, didn't give it to me personally, but he had it in one of his books. And it resonated with me and it's stuck with me ever since. And the trust formula is trust equals frequency plus familiarity, right? What does that mean? It means that people they trust you by how often they see you and how familiar with the way you are that you operate. Okay? So if you're, and where this works in day to day is in advertising, right? He was a great marketer. Marketing and advertising was, ingrained at the hip. People think it's the same thing. It's not. It's one of the channels of marketing, right? It's one of the functions of marketing. But ads everywhere do that. Ads reinforce a message about brand, about perspective. Right? There's two types of marketing. There's brand marketing and there's direct response marketing. So brand marketing is just about reinforcing the brand, what it stands for, what it does, right? It gives you a degree of comfort and trust in the brand that it's reliable and it's going to look after you or solve your problems. And then direct response marketing is going, hey, with this great company that you've grown to enjoy over time, we're having a sale. Or here's an offer just for you. And that's direct response, right? So we are marketing ourselves every single day. Again, from Seth, right? Everything is marketing. When you speak to a customer, you are marketing yourself. You are marketing yourself, and you can leverage the trust formula, frequency and familiarity, by being in front of the customer often, and then creating familiarity by the way that you operate. And then, in our magical minds, we create this expectation, we create this behavior of what things will be like if we constantly engage with this person. So by doing that, leveraging the trust formula, showing up often, being frequent and being familiar, and in that familiarity, you market yourself as a brand that is consistent, reliable, trustworthy, and again, an effective communicator, to wrap this back in. That is one of the most potent ways and the most successful ways to break into these trusted relationships, open a new customer relationship up, and eventually start selling into the customer and becoming a trusted technology advisor. Because eventually, when you've shown up enough and you create that behavior and they trust you because they know that you're going to look after them, you're in that network, and then negotiations become conversations. Vendors become partners, right? You go from being a salesperson to that trusted technology advisor because you have developed the brand of being someone that's trustworthy, a good person to deal with. Okay? Now, the reason why I've mentioned all that, it's probably a core part for another part of the course, but it's fresh in my mind. And it all eventuates down to what is the crux of what I'm teaching in the course. And essentially, it's to be a good person to deal with that has their shit clean, has their corner of the world nice and tidy and clean, and is able to add value to customers by providing perspectives that they don't have because they're in their own four walls of their own existence and their own lives, right? And if you can do that, if you can keep that world clean and solve their problems and keep your shit together in the chaos of your organization, that puts you miles ahead of a person that's just getting by in the business and is happy that they're scraping through and just getting their number. Fuck that. This course is for people to smash their number, to set themselves up as fantastic salespeople, as easy people to deal with, as good business people, and eventually great business leaders of tomorrow. So that is why I'm really focused on these fundamentals and explaining the depths and the hows and the whys of what it means to be good at your job. Okay? So, leaning this back into communication. You need to understand what professional communication looks like, right? It's expected in business. We have these formalized conversations with customers. We have the niceties. We put on the mask, right? We're not our true selves with customers, although it is very useful to be yourself with a customer within reason, right? You don't want to just show up sloppy and interact and be like, what's going on? What's up? The idea is that you build a degree of trust and an environment for them to trust you and to relax and not have to keep their cards so close to their chest, right? But, where am I going with this? Yes, you need to know what the social boundaries are. Generally, I think most of us will understand what that is just by hopefully dealing with people, right? You have to be polite, you have to be respectful, you know what you can and you can't say, and you have to keep your cool, right? In communication, keeping your cool, you can be passionate, but you can't be aggressive and you don't want to be defensive, right? We'll talk about some of the key aspects I've learned from being a stand-up comedian and how that's rapidly changed my approach to presentation, speaking to customers. Because being a comedian, I'll tell you what, it makes you fucking bulletproof in presentations. Because this is what I say all the time. You know what's harder than doing a presentation to an executive? Doing a dick joke to 40 strangers and not getting a single fucking laugh up there. That sucks, right? But in time, right, we want to take these masks off. We do want to get to this relaxed, personable relationship and conversation with your customer because we're all just people in the end. We're all just people trying to figure out our problems and having to collaborate with others, and there's this risk involved in doing that. And that's why you got to keep your cards to your chest, because you don't know if this person outside of your ecosystem is just in there to grab the money and, you know, grab your money and fuck off and leave you in the lurch. Every time we pose an exchange of value with someone, whether it be sales, whether it be a relationship and sex, or even just getting help, we have to be wary of people that are trying to pull a fast one on us for their own gain. But the faster that you can establish that network, that trusted network, either break into it or create it yourself, you can start having more relaxed conversations. You can be real with a customer and be really real. I'm having this right now with customers where I go, hey man, this is tough for you. Let me give you my help as someone that has done, you know, dozens of cloud migrations and sold this product many, many times. I'm not here to get a buck out of you. Yes, there's going to be an exchange of value, but I know that you've got challenges and you're struggling. Let me help you, right? And breaking through that fourth wall of that exchange of customer versus vendor rapidly breaks down those walls. It rapidly breaks down that bullshit that's in between for me, just for a customer just going, what do I do here? How do I get the most out of this situation? How do I make this as smooth as possible for me? Because I just don't fucking know, right? And that trust is powerful, and you need to be able to be trusted with that to the best of your ability. And if you get to that place, you know the deal is done, right? Because they trust you, they will transact with you. You just got to take them through the process as efficiently as possible, making sure they don't get hurt or get fucked up in the way as part of that process. And I've done that with customers many times. And those deep trusted relationships from cutting through the bullshit, being trustworthy is why one of the main reasons I've been so successful at sales. Because I cut the bullshit out by being trustworthy, by communicating effectively what they can and can't do in this situation, based on experience that I've had with customers doing migrations elsewhere or selling solutions elsewhere. Here's what I've done with these people. And again, I'm not a company man. I am me. And one of the things we'll teach probably a little bit further on this episode, if not in the next one, is the power of brand, right? And why your personal brand is more important than the company brand. Cool? So by breaking into these trusted relationships and, you know, being a good communicator in that process, because you are able to leverage your world, you are able to leverage your ecosystem, your inside aspect of your business to work the levers and knobs to try and get someone an outcome in the business as best as you can, because you've mastered your internal environment and built that trust. That's what breaks down the formalities, right? And you can just talk simply, like you're just talking to a friend. And that takes time to be comfortable leading that conversation, right? If you're new to this game, some of the most effective things you can do is, again, keep things simple. Even in this complex world of technology and what's out there and tech sales and strategy and business and blah, 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 speaking simply, honestly, directly, fuck the jargon, fuck the technical bullshit off, talk to people as simply as you can. That is a powerful communication tool, right? And one of your most potent communication tools is the ability to contextualize information and be able to rinse and repeat it in a format that is simple and easy to understand to customers at any level, right? You may have heard of things like, explain it to me like I'm 6 years old, right? Or speak to me in layman's terms, right? If you are not able to communicate things simply and effectively, then you probably don't know it. It's not a deep inner knowing, it's not part of your knowledge base. It's probably a bunch of rote learning that's still sitting in the mechanical part of your mind that's trying to remember all of it, right? So having this deep understanding of what you do and why and what you're doing things for, again, that's what experience does, and that communication is really, really important. I was literally on TikTok just a few minutes before this podcast started, just doing a, chilled out, pretty lazy scroll. And I follow a lot of entrepreneurial accounts. And there was this great clip from, I think it's called 20VC. It's a guy that interviews startup founders and talks just about them, about the process and the business and what they do. And there was this guy that used to work for Jeff Bezos at Amazon. And he asked this guy, what is one of Jeff Bezos's most unique superpowers as a leader? And he said Jeff's ability to context switch was outstanding, right? He was able to simplify complex requirements down to simple next steps. He was able to contextualize the complexity of a new solution being developed into outcomes that were deliverable to the customer. He was able to switch from different business units and change his context of what was going on and speak the language of that context extremely well. Okay, so being able to context switch, being able to translate technical into functional into simple, again, a fantastic way to articulate yourself and a fantastic communication skill. Now, that is probably more advanced. That takes a breadth of information. And again, being able to bring that down and conceptualize that into simple bite-sized chunks is one of the most effective communication tools that we've got. All right, and that's the advanced stuff. But very important to know because, again, this is what we're trying to aspire to. This is what we're trying to aim for. Excusez-moi. So, if you are not an advanced communicator, right? Maybe you're an engineer looking to get more into the sales game. Maybe you've been fallen into sales and you don't have much of a public, you've got a fear of public speaking. You're not much of a great presenter. What is the structure? What is the setup that you can create, the framework of engagement that you can start building around yourself to be a more effective communicator, right? So I've got a bunch of tips and tricks, a bunch of frameworks that I use, based around verbal versus nonverbal communication, removing jargon, rapport building, language. Let's go through a few of these, right? So the first thing when it comes to communication, right? There's verbal and there's nonverbal. Now, everyone thinks it's about the way you talk. The way you talk is important, but it's not everything. I'll have to get the exact numbers down, but let me just write this down as a note. 70. I remember seeing somewhere, and I'll have to pull the information up, but around 70% of your communication is non-verbal, right? And that, when we say non-verbal, it is just the words that you say, right? The rest of your non-verbal communication comes from the way that you project, the tone and the cadence of your voice when you talk, the way that you physically are present in the room, the way how much you use your hands, how influential you can be with your whole body to communicate a situation, right? So again, you may have heard things like, monkey see, no, what is it? What was it? It's like what you say and what you do are two different things, right? We've all seen people And we've all just been like, ugh, what the fuck is this guy talking about? Or this guy is boring as shit. Or maybe you've been looking up lectures on YouTube for technical details and you've just got this Indian bloke that's just droning in, fractured English. And you're like, fuck, this is brutal, right? So the verbal aspect around language, that is about the best way to work on your language is to work on the framing of your language, right? The context and the way that you use language. And I'll give you some examples, right? When you use your language, when they say, we talk about political correctness. What's so good about being politically correct is the way that you can dance around what the context of what's really being said in a way that is not direct or that doesn't put implications in the way that you talk. So what you want to do, being that great politically correct person or that diplomat, right? People say when you're very diplomatic, you are able to negotiate and work your way through complex and emotionally charged situations and communicate your way effectively through that without setting off any emotional triggers or bullshit, right? Being a diplomat means a very selective use of your language. And in the sales game, there are some common levers that you can use in sales to use your language in an effective manner that puts your perspective, your solution, whatever it is, in a positive manner, right? We give it a bit of spin, a bit of gloss, a bit of this and that, right? So one of these ways that you can do this is, again, it's about the perspective that you offer on your solutions. One of my favorite examples is when you kind of want to avoid the term price. You want to avoid the negative implication of the cost, right? People want, in general, as much value as they can with costing them as little as possible. We're always trying to be as efficient with our expenditure as we can. And if you can frame your solutions not as a cost and not to be price focused, because cost and price, these have negative connotations to them. If you feel the essence of what they are, what is this going to cost me, right? What is this going to take away from me? What is the price of something, right? This is what I have to give up in return to get something back. And we don't like to give away something. We love to get something for free or for as good a deal as possible, right? One of the ways that marketers do this, one of my favorite examples of this, is that in fancy restaurants, you will often not see the price symbol, the dollar symbol, next to a price of something. So let's just say I went and got a steak Saturday night with my mum, $50 for a 300 gram Scotch fillet, right? Expensive. But I noticed again on that menu, it wasn't $50 with a dollar sign, it was just 50, right? Because even the presence of the dollar sign can trigger something in our brains about the costs associated with it. Now, again, that's fucking really particular sales psychology there. But it works. It's effective. They found that people that do that, or the restaurants that do that, have people that spend more money because they don't have that subliminal perspective of, oh, this is costing me $50. It's just, oh yeah, this is fun, 50 for that, 15 for that, whatever it is, right? So one of the things that I like to cover is the framing of that language when you talk about your solution. It's not a cost, it's an investment, right? You want to avoid language that has as much negative framing as possible, right? This $5 million solution, it's not a cost to the business, it's an investment in their future because hopefully and once you get to that price part, right, you often have to name your price last in a conversation. You want to build as much value as you can before you get to the brass tacks of how much is this going to cost me, because you want to generate as much value before the seesaw, tips against you with the price, right? If you just think about price as being this big rock that lands on the side of a seesaw, and the other side is value, right? You can build all that value up, and then no matter what, when that price comes, it always goes thud. And if that value is strong enough and doesn't tip the scale over and people don't freak out about the price, then you're in a good position. And you can do that by generating value in the way that you talk, and again, talking about the price that is for your solution in a way that is a necessary investment in their future, right? There's not a cost to this. This is how much you need to invest to get X amount back in 3 to 5 years. This is how much you need to invest to solve this business problem in your organization. This is how much you need to invest to, articulate your value proposition better into market to provide a better solution to customers, therefore providing an ROI of X, right? Again, removing the negative framing from your solution, right? That's not to say to not be unrealistic about the gaps in your solution and what they do, but it's a matter of perspective, right? It's a matter of perception. And one of the other things that's actually really important, I bring this up now, perception is reality, right? One of the reasons why you need to be an effective communicator is because you are often transmitting ideas and your reality to other people in a way to change their perspective on your solution. All right? I have turned around many customers who have hated Telstra, who weren't fans of Cisco, but mostly in the Telstra days, turning them around from hating Telstra, thinking they're useless, overpriced, blah, 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 to being advocates who buy solutions and recommit because I changed their perspective, because I was able to effectively communicate value or bring light to what they were missing from their perspective, right? I was able to shift that balance of price versus value for what is actually a premium product, because Telstra was the most expensive product, networking product in the Australian market, right? So if people don't sense that value, they question the price. But if you are able to communicate the value as to why you're the most expensive, right? Or have, expensive in their eyes, really, we're the biggest and the best, and we're a premium service, right? See that perspective flip? We're a premium service, therefore we attract a premium. Our mobile coverage covers 99.6% of the population compared to Optus's X amount or Vodafone's blah amount, right? Telstra has the largest private data, the largest data networking. We're number one in market for data networking, right? And we have presence and points of presence more than any other carrier in the country. I'm forgetting all the value prop, right? But the idea is you've got to have things in the chamber to generate value and effectively communicate that value, because that's what you're pushing out every single day. So if you can, again, we talked about this last week or maybe the week before, remove as much friction in the sales process as possible, even to the minutia of the way that you communicate your solution and that process and talk people through it, that is going to make you a more effective salesperson day in, day out. Cool? So, another thing to think about that cost versus investment perspective is, again, not putting yourself on the back foot, right? Not having to retract, not having to be sorry, right? Not having to put yourself in that position of, I've done something wrong here or this is bad. Another great little thing that sticks in my head is if you're late to something, if you promise something to a customer and it's been a day or two late, right? You don't go sorry for being late, right? Again, that I'm sorry, the mea culpa, the onus is on me, I apologize. It is thank you for your patience. I appreciate your patience here. You, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, are a patient individual. And I thank you for that. And here is what I've got for you now. And again, that thank you, right? People like that little grain of gratitude, right? And to give someone the quality of being patient, again, it tickles the ego a little bit and it puts them in a positive frame whilst they were thinking potentially negatively of you. Probably not, unless it's, you're really late or you've really fucked up here. But again, it's about minimizing yourself, being on the front foot, being stable, and being able to lead a conversation and lead an engagement with a customer through any situation, right? So that's a little 101 on language and how you should use it. I think the core part of that is the implication of your words, right? When we were talking about before verbal communication, and what I was talking about like say and not do and things like that, it's the implication. What does that imply? The implication is the ability to just touch on a thing, right? Hint at it, a bit of innuendo, a little bit of insinuation, right? You're just fiddling at it. You're not direct. You're not going, this is the problem, or you're a fucking idiot, right? Or this is the situation that we're in. That implication, what does your language imply? What does the choice of your words imply? And everyone, particularly people that are good at talking, and when we talk, great politicians or great diplomats are great at the hint and the suggestion and the implication of their words and the selective choice of it. And that's what makes them very good, because it gives you a little, maybe we could do that, right? It gives you that little curiosity. Ooh, what about that? As opposed to go do this, right? We don't want to be pushed into something. We have this curiosity and this little oop. That's it's tantalizing in a way, right? Because especially, again, making sure your integrity is right, making sure you don't commit to things you can't deliver. You want to give when you have conversations with customers and you want to create that forward perpetual motion in the sale and in the engagement, you want to be using language and you want to be continually framing the engagement in a positive, in a forward direction. And, your perspective and your optimism on that is very important. Again, because it gives them confidence that you are doing the right thing by them because you know what you're saying and why, right? We all have this innate sense of who's a good communicator, who's a good talker, and we have this innateness. We read people a lot, and one of the skills in communication is the ability to read people, right? One of the greatest exercises that you can do to improve your social acuity and understand the language and even understand the breakdown of verbal versus non-verbal communication is to study people and feel them, right? Not physically, you get the vibe from someone, right? If you are not someone that's overly social or, a social creature, more introverted, we all have this extrasensory perception. We're able to feel the energy of people. What's the vibe of someone, right? And that is intrinsically what we are using with people all the time. What's their vibe, right? And that vibe is the culmination of that verbal and non-verbal communication. And generally, you will sense the disconnect between what people say and who they really are and how they portray themselves, because it betrays what their words are betrayed by the way they act and feel and present themselves when they are speaking to people, right? Again, talking about those Indians before, the monotone voice, or you look at your politicians, right? You get a bad vibe from certain politicians. They may be able to know how to speak shit and spin something, but the vibe of someone, Again, that's that sensory, that honing on the sensory perception of who they are and how they present themselves is very important. Right? This is how we hone our people skills and using that energy in connecting with others. All right. So one of the most useful tools, or one of the things that I can often pick up in salespeople to improve their ability to communicate, is something that is something that I learned from somebody else, but I've certainly used for a long time, is the frame of influence. Okay? So the frame of influence, I don't know if you're watching this, but I'll explain it. The frame of influence is the area of space that your hands sort of speak from. You see people all the time speaking with their hands. Great communicators speak with their hands because we use the visual element of our eyes to help articulate the conversation in a certain way, right? We can create emphasis. We can break information down into segments, right? We can really broaden and add depth, right, with the way that we move our hands. And particularly people that are more tactile and physically sensory, it's a good way to, it's a good tool to use to be more influential in the way that you communicate, right? So you may have noticed that if you're watching this, probably not, but if you are watching this, you will see that I talk with my hands a lot, right? That is natural for me because there's so much that's pouring out of me at once that I need to articulate it in a way that gets my point across as fully as possible, right? And even if you are looking at this now, you see me leaning in and you see me articulating it's kind of like sign language. You know when you watch someone that does sign language and I kind of see what they're just doing. Like sign language sometimes just seems to be just made up actions that look similar to what is being described in the words. That's kind of how you need to talk a little bit as well, is really almost pseudo act out what you're doing in this frame of influence. And so why is it the frame of influence? Because the frame of influence is between your belly button and your chin. And that is the area that your hand should be moving in. Because realistically, from your mouth to your face should not be encumbered when you are conversing with a customer, at the very least, or conversing with anyone. Because people, are taking in your face, they're taking in the way where you look, they can see in your eyes, right? The eyes are the window to the soul. They can see to a good degree in your eyes if you're full of shit, if you're even present when you're with someone, right? If you can, people can be talking and just be fucking staring into space. I mean, you've done that plenty of times, right? Or you can see in someone's eyes that they're full of shit. And then you know that they're spluttering their way through and they might say words, but you can just tell they're full of shit by the way that they pause, they hesitate, or they splutter through their words, repeat themselves. You can see the panic in their eyes, right? You need to be aware of this in the way that you communicate. And you need to be able to articulate and pick that up in other people and pick up those social cues, right? Most people are not great at lying. They think they are, but you can, again, if you've got that strong sense of feeling someone, you read their body language, that you sense how in alignment their tone and their cadence is with their message, right? These are all ways to tell if someone's bullshitting you or not. And often, because people are too caught up in trying to cover up the lie or make up the story as they go along, they often miss a cue, or there might be a tell. One of the easiest tells is that, as they say, is, someone will touch their face or touch something on them because there is this mark of dishonesty. They're sort of like trying to hide their dishonesty by sort of distracting it with an action that breaks the frame of influence, or, again, hides the face because they know that there's some sort of bullshit in there that they're trying to hide. So a great activity, go read people. Go maybe watch some great speeches Watch Bill Clinton's speech about him smoking weed in 1992 and sense the difference between someone that's full of shit and someone that's legitimate, right? In 1992, before many of you were probably born who were listening to this, President Bill Clinton, US President Bill Clinton, was talking about how he smoked weed when he was younger, but he did not inhale, right? That is a great example of political dancing and someone using their verbal words, but their tone and their framing and their cadence and the way they describe their story just creates this huge disconnect between what they're saying and what the truth is. And that fucking Bill just blazed it plenty in his day, and no one gives a fuck. It just wasn't acceptable back then. Excuse me. Yes, more exercises. Go people watch. Go sit in public, sit in a restaurant with someone if you want to, a bit of fun. Always fun to people watch, right? Just sit there and observe people and try and get a feel for what the vibe is, right? Is there a couple that's arguing, or are they tense? Is there a tired mum that's just there tolerating their kid running around the playground, right? And what do these situations look like? What does that framing look like? Do you see the disheveled face of the wife or the mum, right? Can you sense that slight unease or that quietness between the couple that's arguing? These acuities, right? These are the things you need to get really good at honing in on. And we all do it. All of us do it, unless you have, some sort of social, Asperger's or autism or something like that. You're not very good at picking up social cues. Maybe that's you. Maybe you're an engineer that's, a little bit on the spectrum, whatever. But hone this tool. Hone your feel, your vibe ability. Because that lends itself into being able to read a customer, and not just read a customer, but read an opportunity, read a deal. What do I mean by that? Eventually, you'll be able to hone your gut, right, on an opportunity, on a deal that you're working on, because you understand the people are involved, the way they're speaking to you, and then eventually you understand the competitive landscape, you understand who you're competing against, you understand the next steps, right? The processes of the sales process, there you go, process of the sales process, will be ingrained into you after a couple of years, to the point where I go to experienced sellers, people that I know, even my sales managers will come to me and I go, what's your gut on the situation? How do you feel about this deal? Do you think you're going to win it or not? And pretty often my gut is quite right, because I understand, I see how customers are communicating with me, what level of trust are they giving me, what level of information are they giving me? Do I know what the competitive landscape is like? Do I have the customer's attention, and are they giving more attention to me and insight that I think they're giving to other people? Do I know what the competitors are going to be doing to win this deal, and how does my solution compare against theirs, but function or price or capability, etc. So honing your people skills compounds into you honing, your ability to make gut decisions on people. And again, most of what the art of sales is, no matter what segment it is really about that intuition, that gut feeling, that sense of people that we get in others. The more you use that and the less robotic you are as an individual, the higher your chances of success, or at least being successful in the field. Because again, people are buying from people, right? We're all solving business problems, and eventually, again, everything in this world exists for people. So you need to understand them and know how to read them effectively. What's one of the best ways that you can be a fantastic communicator? Is to be an even better listener, right? You may have heard this before. 2 ears, 1 mouth. You need to listen twice as much as you talk. You need to let customers talk to you about their problems. You need to let them give themselves enough rope to hang themselves on. What does that mean? That's an old adage that goes, eventually people will talk their bullshit to a point where it fucks them up, or you can use it against them, or eventually people will reveal the flaws in their logic and their deduction and reasoning. And if you are sharp with that, and because you know the process better than others, you can pick that up and correct them or use that to your advantage. Not to judge them or put them down, but maybe to correct them and provide a bit of value on a new perspective that might be more useful to them. And then that value, again, shifts your brand, shifts your perspective, creates that lever between price and value in your favor. Right? It's just another run. It's just a point on the scoreboard for you being a good bloke or lady, right? Or in between, 2023. So what are some aspects, key points of listening, right? Number one, take notes. Take key points notes. Anything that makes you go, or aha, yeah, that's different, that's new, write that down. You need to be able to get the essential information out of a customer, and we'll go through that later. There's things like frameworks like BANT, like budget, authority, needs, and time. What's the critical information about the solution that you need to know to shape it, to shape a solution for the customer. We'll talk about that later on in the sales forecasting and prospecting component. And what was I talking about? Sort of starting to run out of gas here because it's late. What's important to know? One of the most effective tools, and I learned this from Chris Voss. I think he calls himself the FBI negotiator, something like that. He's written a couple of books. I'm going to hopefully put some context and some articles of his up in the Tech Sales Academy community. And there's some effective ways to listen to people. Right? Number one, you need to hear them for them. You need to hear people without your agenda of trying to sell them something first, right? Never look at a customer with dollar eyes in the back of your head, right? If anything, if you see that the opportunity gets bigger and bigger, you should have a perspective of invested concern, right? And support. As opposed to going, whoa, I'm going to make so much fucking money out of this guy. No one wants to hear that. No one wants to hear how much you're going to extract out of someone when you don't know them, right? So, concern, solving their problem. What would you do? What can you do by listening to them to solve their problem without the predetermination of your target being hit in this conversation, in this exchange, right? Another thing is like repeating things back. Repeat what you have taken from a customer's conversation and say it back to them. Repeat it back. What Chris Voss, I got distracted. One of the things that Chris Voss says is about mirroring. There's two types of mirroring. There's physical mirroring and there's verbal mirroring. So when we say verbal mirroring, it's repeating something back to the customer that they've just said to show that you comprehend and understand them, right? And one of the studies they did, I'm paraphrasing here, but the context is, they did the study, you go to a restaurant, right, and you got a server there, someone's trying to help you out. If a waiter comes up to you and takes your order and just goes, I want steak, I want this, I want that, and they just go, yep, versus I want a steak, I want chips, and I want a Coke, and they go, one steak, chips, and a Coke, you feel more confident that they've understood you and they have comprehended you to a point where you can, your things are going to go well because you've repeated it back to them, you've acknowledged their information, and that makes them feel understood, and that builds that rapport and that connection, that there is this inherent risk of them asking for something from you and the risk that you're not going to come good on your request as a waiter, as anything, right? And they showed that there was increased confidence, and I think they got bigger tips and something like that by the waiters repeating back and repeating the last thing that the customers had said to them. That shows the ability of listening, active listening, right? That's an important part as well. That's a note. I've got to spend more time on listening. And see, this is why I do this. This is why I put a draft out, because I figure out where the flaws are in my own logic and what I'm teaching to you, and then you get a fucking $30 million sales course for nothing. Good value, huh? More on this. So, listening, important. Keeping things simple, very important. One of the things that you will come up early and often in your career is this fucking ridiculous entire new language of jargon, of acronyms that you have no idea what they mean. You don't understand the context behind them. They could be technical bullshit that you have no idea about. And one of the biggest disconnects, one of the hugest disconnects, and one of the biggest ways I can tell how effective someone is as a communicator in their role, in whatever they do, is the level of jargon that exists in their organization and how they speak it back to you, right? If someone bombards you with jargon and it talks to you in a way that you're expected to know that just because you're in the ecosystem and they don't correct themselves, they have this presumption that you know what they're talking about. And again, they're just often rote listening and rote speaking out what they mean to communicate, because all they know is the word and a vague understanding of what it means, because that vague understanding is that thin understanding of what that is the link in their logic and in the knowledge of what they know on that particular topic, right? So if you are someone that's jargon heavy, without necessity, sometimes you have to use some jargon, or maybe you have to teach something that simplifies the language down, sure. But in general day-to-day conversation, you should be removing technical jargon unless it's absolutely necessary to communicate what is going on, right? Maybe if it's like a core technical language, like if you're in networking, you talk about natting and IP address or whatever it is, things like that, the real technical stuff. Again, as a salesperson, you won't be using that much anyway. The more jargon you have in a conversation, the more chance you're going to confuse a customer and make them feel dumb and confused. And that makes you more difficult to deal with because they don't feel understood and listened to, like you know their problems, because you're speaking a complete different language to them, right? You are not building that rapport by meeting them at their level. That is a very easy gap to fix in your communication skill set, is talking simply, contextualizing, simplifying that, right? Removing the jargon. In fact, what I tell a lot of my guys who are trying to sell is that they get a little intimidated speaking to executives, right? CTOs, CEOs, CFOs, COOs, big business people. And because they don't understand how much they know about a solution and what their context is to a solution that's being designed. I'll give you an example, right? Very often when you are speaking to people about an opportunity, about a deal, the IT manager or the CTO will be the technical decision maker, but the financial decision, right, the one who holds the money, that has the budget to make this shit happen, will often be the chief financial officer, the CFO, right? The IT manager might have budget to X amount, but has to ask the CFO if we can do more for Y amount to do something else, okay? And often a lot of account managers, a lot of salespeople get intimidated by the conversation of speaking cross-functionally inside an organization because they, have a middling understanding of it at a technical and solution level through the jargon that they've learned in the process of learning about their solution to the IT manager, who will get it, right? Because that's their world is technology. But a lot of that will go out the window when they speak to a CFO or a COO, a chief operations officer or an operations manager, when they're trying to, if they have to try and pitch to multiple stakeholders in the business, when they have to speak and explain why their solution is best for them and why and what the value is to people of a non-technical audience. And the number one answer to that is to not speak technically at all, right? I say this, there is executive selling and there is technical selling. You break it in half, okay? So what I do is I am speaking to executives. I understand the value proposition of the solution. I understand the function of it, and I should be able to communicate the value and what it does to the business and why it's valuable in that 6-year-old terminology, right? Maybe not 6 years old, maybe 15 to 20-year-old, but at a level where the lay person can get it because they don't have the technical background. The CFO's world is not about how many megabits or how much CPU or how many routers or switches or things they need. They don't understand all of that. They just know how much is it going to cost and what is this thing going to do for our business. That's it. So being able to contextualize the business value and what it solves in the business at that executive level is the more important skill for you to have as a salesperson and an account manager. The technical stuff, you leave that to the partners, you leave that to your engineers, you leave that to the technical side, right? The tech people in the business. I say to customers all the time, right? And they like this. It's not like I'm trying to dismiss them. They like the simplicity of this, right? As I go, and I said this to a CTO. I remember seeing this to a CTO of a high-end law firm, and she completely agreed, right? I speak with you at the executive level. I let the propeller heads talk, right? What I mean by propeller heads, the nerds. I let the nerds speak nerd language and make it all fit and work and tick the box, and I continue to, and that deals with the technical stakeholders, and I remain engaged at that executive and strategic and business and functional level with my solution with the customer and articulating that, right? Because at the end of the day, the value represented in the solution is not by how, it is important, right? It is important that the pieces fit, right? But it's easy to make the pieces fit because there's more common languages and integrations in that place than the articulation of the value of the solution to the business that you're trying to sell it to, right? So keep being able to contextualize and keep it high level, but engaging, right? By being an effective communicator, being impactful with your language, right? Putting it in a positive frame, talking about the investment required to make the solution work, to solve the problem with the technology that we've got for you. That is, and also, again, listening. Again, probably the first foremost, listening without agenda. Those are the key tools in your tool belt as a communicator in the soft skill arsenal that I'm trying to build for you for your long-term success, right? Active listening, managing and mastering your verbal and non-verbal communication, articulating your language and your tone to be positive instead of negative, removing all the jargon and keeping your shit simple and effective, being able to delegate the technical conversation to someone that is more relevant and more suited to that in the organization, and then being able to build rapport and trust to a point where you are breaking down the mask and the wall with your customers and, again, becoming that trusted technology advisor, breaking into the network by being someone that is trustworthy, useful, articulate, valuable, and someone that is easy to deal with. And then, 6, 12, 18 months down the line, you're just having a conversation with a friend. What are we doing next? What's going on? Maybe you get a bit of gossip of what's happening in the business because, people love to bitch and moan about their business. And if they can talk about it outside of work to someone that isn't their wife or someone that doesn't give a fuck, good, right? That's what I said. When you become a trusted technology advisor to your customers, negotiations become conversations. Salespeople become partners, right? Or what is it? Vendors become partners, and salespeople become trusted technology advisors. And that is something that I've leaned heavily on in my career to great success. Again, multiple case studies, an extremely high win ratio for sales. And again, just being an effective communicator, right? So I think I'm close to the hour now, so I will wrap this up. I did not talk about, I might just throw this in for a little bit because we're all talking about communication. I wrote this yesterday. And again, it was just a little bit about presentation skills from being a comedian. So I've always been a good natural talker, always loved, being the center of stage, center of attention, always been articulate. But being a stand-up, it took my communication and presentation skills to a whole nother level. And most of it is around fear, about being fearless. I don't really get afraid or nervous in customer meetings, even in presentations, even as to bigwigs. I like the big stage because, again, the big stage to other people is the little stage to me, because I've said fucking heinous things on stage and the idea of trying to make a joke out of them, and they have bombed horrifically, right? And people have gone, what the fuck are you doing? And that level of pain creates a callus in you that means that if people don't like your deal or your offer, well, it is what it is, and you move on because there's plenty more to come, right? Think abundantly about your deals and what's coming next, right? And yeah, that confidence, that callous, that fearlessness that's inside, a lot of people don't have that. And that's one of the reasons why people think they're not good at sales, is because they're not good at public speaking or the ability to converse in public. But, if you really want to get better at it, if you really want to throw yourself in the deep end, go and write 5 minutes worth of jokes and go to an open mic and try to do 10 open mics and see how fucking hard it is. But just like someone going from a marathon to jogging, it'll be fucking easy once you go out and try and sell to people, because you're used to the rejection, right? You're used to the feedback and the negativity. Comedy is just all about feedback. It's a constant process of failure over and over again, much like what sales is, right? You're going to be rejected. People are going to ignore you or think you're full of shit and all that over and over again. It just builds that social callus and you go, on to the next thing, on to something better. So what are the key lessons that I have about stand-up comedy, and why does it make you a better presenter? Number one, have a set of prepared material. What do I mean by that? When you watch a comedy show, you think that the comedian, it might be saying these things off the cuff and, for the first time. And it's, if you watch the great comedians like your Bill Burrs or your Dave Chappelle's or whatever it is, it sounds like they're just ranting to you on the spot. And it feels natural, doesn't feel rehearsed, doesn't feel like they're trying to present something to you. But realistically, they have done those jokes hundreds of times, and some of those jokes could be years old. They have honed the art of articulating what they're trying to do to the beautiful art of tone and cadence in speech, and are able to provide context. And there is a real proper art to the communication, right? The art of communication in verbal communication is absolutely inherent in stand-up comedy. And if you want to become a great presenter, go be a good comedian, right? But to go back to having a set of prepared material, you need to know what your value proposition is, and you need to have, again, in this big tool belt that I'm trying to build for you, a couple of quips, a couple of stories, a couple of interesting points that makes your solution, your organization, who you are, stand out and be memorable against the other noise that's happening in that person's life, right? You need to be able to, at the drop of a hat, explain why your solution is fantastic, why it's innovative, why it's better than others. You need to, at the drop of a hat, understand why your organization is the best organization for that company to invest in, right? You need to know these things. And I see plenty of salespeople who are woefully underprepared And some of them will just rely on their slide decks and they don't even know how to use their slide decks properly. They sort of lean on the text that they put in there and read off the slide deck, which is another thing that I will cover in the course, is how to present and articulate well using presentations, because that will be, again, one of your key weapons. You'll be presenting a solution and a sale to a customer and being able to articulate what the solution is to them in that and how to do that well. But they're not prepared, right? Because they don't know that it's fine to have rinsable and repeatable material. It's fine to have a script that you've memorized to a degree about a solution, about a particular product. Is it your lead or your hero product, right? Be prepared. Have a set of stuff that you can talk about and why. Number 2, don't let the audience smell blood. What do I mean by that? What we talked about before. You don't want to put yourself in that negative framing. You need to be able to handle difficult situations with grace, right? Whether it be a tough conversation with a customer that's, because shit's fallen over, or you found yourself caught out in a situation because your logic is flawed and it's been picked out by the customer, or they've asked a question that you just don't simply know about. But if you go, I don't know what's going on, oh shit, that shows a lack of confidence in you and your ability to solve the problem, deliver the solution, articulate that effectively. So in the frame of comedians, comedians bomb a lot. What is bomb? Bombing is when your jokes don't go well and they fall flat and there's that awkwardness, right? And then if you're really bombing, joke after joke is not working and the audience is getting more and more awkward, right? And there's that tension in the room and you're like, ugh, the cringe. Great comedians know how to sit in a bomb, or they know how to carry the energy of the situation from a perspective of, I'm just going to blow that negative energy out of here and we're going to start again. Or I'm just going to be as forthcoming and energetic and genial towards you to a point where we turn the energy in this room around, right? But first, you need to have the confidence and the candor and the internal capability to be like, all right, shit sucks in here. Let's move forward. How do we build from this? And often, one of the best ways to break that overarching tension in a room when things aren't going right and everyone can sense it, everyone can sense this is a shit show that's happening, is to address it. Is to go, guys, clearly we haven't thought about this properly, or guys, this is a shit show. I'm aware of that. Don't think that we don't know what's going on here. Let me come back to you about this, okay? If you don't address that tension, that negative sentiment, that festers in an engagement with a customer or anyone, right? You think about someone you bicker with all the time. Maybe you've fucking had the shits with your boyfriend or your girlfriend because you guys have been bickering over time and there's that underlying tension. You haven't addressed it, right? But once you address it, once you talk about it, once you articulate it and bring it into, from this subconscious into the conscious by, bringing the light into it, it dissipates, right? So that's a great way to dissipate the smell of blood and then also be able to build from that and turn things around. But you need to be able to stand up and take the hits without showing that you're buckling under the pressure. And that takes time and effort, but this is about making you great. So not being able to smell blood. The other two, I could go again. I thought I wasn't going to make an hour, but here we go. I've got an hour plus. The other two things I'll talk about is storytelling. Storytelling is one of the most important tools, and I should probably put that further up in this piece. Storytelling, people love stories. We have communicated via story, beginning, middle, and end, since the dawn of time. Everything we know about ourselves is based on story. It's a story we tell ourselves, from nursery rhymes to fairy tales, great movies. They're all stories. You want to tell a story. You probably would have heard this with great copywriting or good marketers. They tell stories about how thing has done something better for somebody else. You don't talk about why the product is better. You tell the story of how you've taken someone from A to B to improve their life, improve their capabilities with your solution. Don't talk about what this product does and why. So becoming a great storyteller, right? Do you have even good stories about previous successes you've had with other customers with your solutions, right? If you go, hey, in the heyday of Microsoft Teams, for example, which at the beginning of the heyday of Microsoft Teams, which is around the pandemic when organizations needed to stand up collaboration, remote collaboration and soft phones and things like that, I was making a fucking killing selling Microsoft Teams seats, thousands upon thousands, because I was able to tell the story about how we've improved and switched things on quickly for another customer like that, right? People like the context of why something affects them and the proximity of how that thing can be solved for them as well. That's why people love a case study. When you see a lot of customers that come around with case studies and testimonials, and often those testimonials are ineffective if they are customers that are not in the same country or in a different region. You kind of go, oh yeah, but they're a Chinese thing, because they lose the context. The story needs to be able to resonate closely with the customer, right? The proximity and the warmth and the closeness you have to the customer and able to tell their story back at them through a solution you've done with other people, that's an influential story. That is some useful shit to have in your arsenal. So particularly if you are someone that works in a vertical, right? If your portfolio of customers is in a vertical, let's just say you deal with financial services a lot and professional services, you can go to a customer on the side and be like, hey, I know you're looking at this solution. We've put it in other customer as well. This other customer is one of your competitors, for an example. So they go, oh yeah, if it works for them, it works for us. Shouldn't be a problem, right? In schools right now and not-for-profits, Microsoft is huge in that world. Why? Because it caught on fire. Anything with territories, there's no competition. Like I think I talked about this before. Local councils, they don't compete. They have territories. So they collaborate often about solutions that they should use together. Same with not-for-profits. Some of them do compete, but they don't. They actually all collaborate. Because the story got around of how it worked for somebody else there's these leading councils that will be the innovators, they're the leaders, and then they tell the story of how it worked for them, and that influences their followers, the other smaller councils or other, what is it called? Contemporaries, I couldn't think of the other word, but contemporaries, that relates to them, right? The story that sounds really true to someone that's right next to them, then it'll work for them as well. So being able to tell your story and tell it effectively and make it resonate for the customer's problem, very useful tool. The last thing, and this is advanced stuff, this is some real kind of woo-woo shit, but it kind of leads into what we talked about last week about emotions versus logic. That storytelling, if you are effective in the way that you create the narrative and you understand the tone and the cadence of a good story, and there's the high point and there's the low point and the problem solved and here's something to save the day. If you can take a customer through that emotional journey and they're happy at the end, great. In that happy story, there needs to be a dose of logic as to why your solution was the hero in that story, right? Just like, and again, this is the human element of sales all over again. What did we talk about last week? That emotions drive a huge amount of pretty much all of the business to consumer market, selling from business directly to you as an individual. And there is big influence of emotions in the B2B world as well. And one of the best ways that you can evoke that emotion is through great storytelling that aligns people and resonates with people at that emotional level. They get the right vibe from the story. They like the happy ending at the end. And that happy ending is a result of your product or your solution. That is you nailing sales, in a presentation format and being a great communicator. So this is where it gets a little bit manipulative, right? But again, to be able to communicate and articulate, and that communication is meant to draw and elicit emotional and psychological safety, right? That's extremely important. Psychological safety. We'll talk about that in leadership later on. But essentially, all of your communications, this is actually a great way to wrap this up, all of your communications, your storytelling, the way you're about listening, is to evoke, first and foremost, the emotion and the feeling of psychological safety in the customer. Safe for them to exchange their vulnerabilities and their challenges in the business. What's really keeping the business up? What's really keeping them up at night, right? It's breaking into that trusted network that you're not just trying to fuck them over. They can trust you because they feel psychologically safe, sharing their vulnerabilities with you and their challenges to a point where you can really solve the problem, right? And then, if you build that psychological safety and then you stack in the that emotion, the psychological safety, again, is often predominantly based around that hierarchy of commitment. That a psychological safety is often the vulnerability of their identities in the exchange, right? Because for some reason, and we all do this, if we feel like there's a problem in the business, and we have this problem to solve, and it's implied on us as the business leader or the CTO or the IT manager to solve that problem, if we don't solve it, that attacks the identity, right? If you can't solve this problem for the business, you are looked upon as a subpar CTO or a subpar IT manager or a subpar whatever your role is. And so that dance, that mask that we put on in the initial niceties in the exchange is us dancing between how do I get what I need without exposing my vulnerabilities to be leveraged and used against me. And then eventually, if you are useful as a salesperson, as a great people person in tech, as a great communicator, in your engagements, using the trust formula, showing up frequently, providing a familiarity of trustworthiness, that's what breaks down, that emotion, that emotional wall, creates that psychological safety, and then that's when the real exchange can happen to create a great business relationship. And again, this is when we talk about becoming that trusted technology advisor, breaking into the breaking into the trusted network. And then, like we said before, negotiations become conversations, salespeople's, partners become vendors become partners, strategic partners, and salespeople become trusted technology advisors, right? Whew. A lot more to cover, I think, in there. I think I've gone on close to an hour and a half, so let's wrap this up. Again, bit rambly, but plenty of value in there. Just needs to be a little bit tidied up. So Tech Sales Academy, Tech Sales Academy, if you want to check this shit out, should have the pre-launch funnel up in the next couple of weeks. Pretty close. But again, if you're finding this useful, if you've got any feedback, got any questions, please reach out to me at Jamil J. Raymond on all the socials. DM me, send me an email. You know where to find me. Next week, we will talk about some more sales stuff, presentations, portfolio management. There's a lot. We'll figure it out as we go along. But again, thanks for your time and attention, people. Hope you're finding this useful. See you again next week. Ciao for now.